Marzette died apparently of natural cause, and Devil Jackson had gotten shotgun in the face the night before. And there was some indication that the person that killed Devil Jackson was one of the informants that I would be working with.
Devil Jackson, being an old-timer guy who kind of knew his way around the streets, he sees that for whatever reason this guy Eddie Jackson is the real thing, and this guy has gone from a nobody in the streets to the man in the streets in like 18 months.
Devil Jackson had been shotgunned in the face the day that John Sutton arrived in Detroit, possibly by the very confidential informant Sutton was supposed to be working with. So he turned his sights to other dealers, including Devil Jackson's protege, a man that had managed to stay out of Henry Marzette's war, Eddie Jackson. In early 1971, John Klassen, Eddie Jackson's supplier, was indicted in federal court and promptly disappeared. But Jackson and Courtney Brown kept their operation going until they made an even bigger connection in New York City.
I told you all that I was the greatest of all time.
So the plan is simple. Eddie will go out to New York, take his bankroll, take half his crew with him. Devil Jackson will introduce him to Goldfinger, some of the Cubans out there. He'll go back, get back in business.
Sonny, listen, I told you today I'm still the greatest of all time.
So when Eddie's at the fight, of course, there's an iconic photo taken in the Ebony magazine where the famous picture of Frank Lucas from American Gangster fame when he's in his chinchilla, and also Eddie is photographed by the photographers of Ebony in conjunction with Devil Jackson, a guy named Philo Garrett, and his brother Elijah. The day before the fight, Eddie has a happenstance meeting with some members of the Gambino crime family, and you know the rest is kind of history. Eddie ends up doing business with the Gambino family for the next 10 years and makes phenomenal amounts of money.
Eddie Jackson crossed paths with the high-ranking member of the Gambino Mafia family, the largest and most powerful in the country, who told him, quote, "It looks like we're in the same business." And indeed, they were.
After that, I was assigned investigations. I went out and worked on Eddie Jackson.
Once he bought that Rolls Royce and moved to Southfield and tore down the house and rebuilt the house, he was a target.
You're under constant surveillance. There have been all kinds of stories about your alleged connections with the underworld drug market. What's your reaction, Mr. Jackson?
Well, as far as the connections, that's 100% false. And as far as the surveillance, I welcome, you understand, anybody who feel like they want to waste their time watching me, you understand, well, then they can.
The authorities had leaked the indictment to the press. They had put our homes on the front page. And
Mr. Jackson, it's alleged that just 6 years ago you were earning a little better than $3 an hour as an auto production worker. Just how did you come to acquire this home in Southfield and your other business interests, your automobiles?
Well, I think the law states, that you have to file your income. If I tell you that, then you know my secret, But as long as I file my income, and I think this is what the law states, and I do that.
Do you deny flatly that you were in any way tied in with the illegal drug traffic?
Yes, I do.
Would you care to reveal just what your business holdings are, how you've acquired this wealth?
No, it is a matter of record. If you want to check on that, you can check.
It's a matter of record. You're saying that you have property?
Yes, I do.
How did you acquire the property? Would you mind telling us that, sir?
Well, if I tell you that, then you'll know my business.
Your family's house appears on the front page of the biggest newspapers in Detroit. This was the biggest story in town for the summer of '73. And here we have Milton Henry, who was your father and Eddie's lawyer, kind of negating some of the stuff that was going on.
Now, on the other hand, we don't think the government can try this lawsuit anywhere but in a court. And that's all we've been saying, that they ought not to attempt to cast us into the news media and to a public trial in this unrestrained area of rumor, innuendo, suspicion, and all of that.
On just the surface, we were the quote-unquote black success story.
To get the story of this market, to be able to tell you the secret of selling the Negro, we did a lot of digging. We talked to leading businessmen, the customers, and the salesmen.
We're right next to Eddie's next to us. You got the Cadillac, you got Mercedes, you got another Cadillac, you got his crowd pleaser Rolls Royce.
Yeah. And he would throw money?
From reliable sources, guys that rode with him, it was nothing. If you caught him on the right day, he might throw $40,000, $50,000 out the window.
50 in 1972, which is like $250,000 now.
Yeah. What is a safe assessment is that between 1969 to 1977, with only possible exception, Berry Gordy, Eddie Jackson was the richest black man in the state of Michigan. And the class of him and Berry Gordy and whoever was number 3, they were a long way down.
They were a distant third.
It was a distant third.
Well, Mr. Jackson has legitimate income on which he pays income tax. That's more than can be said for a whole lot of folks.
Let's talk about their lawyer. Who was Milton Henry?
Milton Henry, Malcolm X's, obviously the civil rights great leader.
He was Malcolm X's chief legal defense.
Chief legal defense and just confidant. If you read anything about like Malcolm's travels, like when Malcolm was poisoned in Africa, it was Milton Henry who drove him. Yale law degree, Yale divinity degree.
Probably one of the top 10 lawyers in the United States, and certainly the top black lawyer in the United States.
Without question.
Over the weekend in Detroit, police and the members of the so-called Republic of Africa, a Negro separatist group, fought a gun battle inside and outside a church. A white policeman was killed, another was wounded, and 5 Negroes were injured.
An interesting side story that we will revisit is the interplay between the black militant movement and black drug kingpins. As we'll see later, there was a secret war going on in the streets. Black power meant different things to different people. And the money generated by selling white powder sometimes helped fund the cause.
A meeting of the Republic of New Africa, a militant Negro separatist organization, was in progress inside the church. Police said the men who shot the officers had taken refuge in the church and had continued firing outside. 4 people inside the meeting were wounded.
In Detroit, it seems like Eddie Jackson was smart enough to avoid this. His lawyer, Milton Henry, sat on the board of the Republic of New Africa, a black separatist group that wanted to seize control of the old Confederate states and make them a black homeland. When the Republic of New Africa got into a shootout inside of a Detroit church, Milton Henry was able to get the accused out on a personal bond from a black Detroit judge.
The judge said Cahalan's objections had racial overtones.
It's beyond me why he would inject the racial issue into this thing at all.
There is no racial overtone as far as you're concerned?
Oh, absolutely not.
Courtney Brown Jr. told me that his father and Eddie Jackson would occasionally receive phone calls from Milton Henry requesting a donation be made to the Republic. So Eddie Jackson would take $50,000 or $60,000 of the cash that he usually spent on European cars and South African diamonds and send it over to the cause of black separatism. Complicated times indeed.
The crime of murder is not unusual in this country, and nowhere is that more apparent than in Detroit, which has an unenviable record. Last year, more than 700 murders.
I immediately detected that there was something missing here, that there was a tremendous erosion of the political system and erosion of the police department, erosion of the religious system in the city. When I arrived in Detroit, I saw a kind of lawlessness that I never thought existed in any city. You know, you could easily be killed by being thought to be either the police or working for the police. One dope house I went into, I had a gun put in each year, so you got to give up the Roscoe.
Whether it was Red Fox or the Temptations or the Dramatics or the OJs or whomever it might have been, and numerous other celebrities who came into town. Eddie might call him and say, "Hey, Berman," you know, that's what he called my dad, "Berman, do me a favor, one of those Motown boys is big and they say they need us to do this or that for them. Can you please stop by?" And if they had some vices or drugs of choice, Eddie was the guy to come to, because he used to give it to him for free. And then we lived next door to a lot of them. A lot of these guys were our neighbors. One Christmas, Eddie goes downstairs, Eddie Jr. goes downstairs, and his dad and a multi-Grammy winning artist both had, a bunch of white circles around their noses.
In January of 1972, just months before Motown Records left Detroit, Courtney Brown Jr.'s father was caught in the biggest heroin seizure in Michigan history, along with his boss, Eddie Jackson.
Eddie and George Blair gets on the phone and tells some people that the dope is there, which the DEA overheard with the wiretap.
The Gambino family had just sent Eddie and Courtney a huge load of untouched heroin from New York, and they were in the process of cutting, packing, and dispensing it to their crew when federal agents burst into the stash house.
We're going to cut it 10 times at a minimum, so that would have been 120 kilos. Reggie went down watching television and was watching the door. Police, then all the hell broke loose. Eddie and I runs upstairs. Eddie threw the dope up in the air. It was so strong they had to get gas masks. They had to wait to get gas masks because the fume was so strong. They got stick.
And he came out of the house with a saucer full of heroin, and he had 2 guns strapped like Roy Rogers, and had a little automatic underneath the platter of heroin. He stated something to the effects, I hope none of you EMFs are not thinking about robbing me, because I have enough arsenal up in here to start a little war up in this motherfucker.
One of Agent Sutton's targets was being guarded by a heroin messiah, a Vietnam veteran whacked out on drugs who kept a grenade in a bag around his neck as the ultimate security measure.
And this guy had a robe that was fashioned out of a sheep and had a kind of a welt belt around his waist, and he had a little tote bag in his hand, and it was under investigation by ATF. And they suspected that he had frag grenades inside of that little tote bag that he was carrying. And all the places I'd visit, Detroit to me was the most out of control that I had ever experienced. I had never been in such fear than when I came to Detroit. The reason the dopers were armed, they had another group out there. They called them the Jackers, which was a slang for hijackers. We had people that were out there robbing dope houses and dope people.
You don't have to worry about the police department or worry about getting some overdose of drugs when you go to the drug house or the dope house. You got to worry about someone kicking the door and want to stick the place up.
It was January of 1973, and somebody was robbing heroin dealers, sometimes with serious violence on the west side of Detroit. These were the Jackers, black militants who were financing the cause by ripping off dope dealers. Then they started shooting the police.
The Detroit police have an undercover program called Stress, which spelled out says stop the robberies, enjoy safe streets. Since early December, 6 of the officers have been shot, one of them fatally. The police concluded that 3 blacks were responsible for all the shootings and proceeded to launch the biggest manhunt in Detroit's history. This has led to a lot more controversy.
The furious manhunt for the 3 black suspects, door to door and often at night, stirred an angry wave of resentment in Detroit's black community and prompted the city council to air the many complaints of police misconduct. It was a bitter session, punctuated by shouts, epithets, and continuing charges of racism and police terrorism.
3 men were accused of killing the Detroit police officer while in the course of robbing drug dealers to provide money for the cause of Black Power. 2 of those men were killed in a shootout with the Atlanta police. The remaining suspect was a man named Hayward Brown.
We've, of course, been meeting regularly with our client. He understands the political nature of what is happening with reference to these motions that have been filed, is enheartened, to say the least, by the expression of support that was brought forth this morning by leading figures inside of the community, and is confident that justice will in fact triumph.
Hayward Brown's lawyer, Ken Cockrell, became famous for getting the accused cop killer off nearly scot-free, and Cockrell went on to become a member of the Detroit City Council. Hayward Brown was killed in Detroit during the mid-1980s while robbing a man for his gold chain.
But there are a lot of people, even in the Frank's organization, that were killed and executed in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia was home to some of the most violent gangsters of the era, a group christened by law enforcement as the Philly Black Mafia, and one of the most truly frightening sets of criminals from the entire era.
Philadelphia in Darby's section, and they cut a drug dealer's head off and put his head on the outside window rail of the